Welcome to the InnoGuide Podcast, where we share the works of authors and mentors to guide innovation. In this episode, number 41, we'll be sharing A Brief History of Intelligence, Part 2 by Max Bennett. Chapter 8, Why Life Got Curious. Let's talk about curiosity, one of the most fascinating and uniquely vertebrate traits. It's the drive to explore, seek out the unknown, and to learn for the sake of learning. This chapter takes us on a journey through the evolution of curiosity, from its role in modern AI systems to its origins in the tiny brains of our fish-like ancestors 500 million years ago. The AI that got curious. In the world of artificial intelligence, reinforcement learning algorithms have achieved incredible feats. They've mastered games like Pong, Space Invaders, and even complex strategy games. But there's one game that stumped them for years, Montezuma's Revenge. This Atari game is notoriously difficult because the first reward is hidden far into the game, requiring players to explore multiple rooms filled with obstacles before they even get a hint of success. For traditional reinforcement learning systems, which rely on immediate rewards to guide behavior, this was an insurmountable challenge. That is until 2018, when Google's DeepMind introduced a new twist, curiosity. By giving AI systems an intrinsic motivation to explore, rewarding them for discovering new places and trying new things, DeepMind's algorithm finally beat Level 1 of Montezuma's Revenge. Instead of relying on random actions, the AI explored deliberately, driven by the novelty of uncovering new rooms and paths. This breakthrough highlighted the importance of curiosity in learning systems, both artificial and biological. The exploitation-exploration dilemma. Curiosity solves a fundamental problem in reinforcement learning. The exploitation-exploration dilemma. Should you stick to what you know works, exploitation, or try something new, exploration? These two drives are inherently at odds. Exploitation focuses on maximizing rewards based on past experiences, while exploration seeks out the unknown, often at the expense of immediate rewards. Early reinforcement learning algorithms handled this trade-off crudely by randomly exploring new actions a small percentage of the time. But this approach failed in complex environments like Montezuma's Revenge, where random exploration was too inefficient. By introducing curiosity, making novelty itself rewarding, AI systems could explore more intelligently, mimicking the way humans and animals learn. The evolution of curiosity in vertebrates. The success of curiosity-driven AI systems suggests that curiosity is a fundamental requirement for reinforcement learning to work. And indeed, curiosity is a hallmark of vertebrate brains. From fish to mice to humans, vertebrates exhibit a drive to explore and learn, even in the absence of external rewards. This is because, in vertebrates, surprise itself triggers the release of dopamine, reinforcing exploratory behavior. Interestingly, most invertebrates lack curiosity. While some advanced invertebrates, like insects and cephalopods, show signs of curiosity, this trait evolved independently of their lineages. In contrast, curiosity appears to have been present in the earliest vertebrates, co-evolving with their ability to learn through reinforcement. Gambling, a quirk of curiosity. Curiosity also helps explain one of the more irrational behaviors seen in vertebrates, gambling. Gambling violates Thorndike's law of effect, continuing to engage in a behavior, betting, even when the expected reward is negative. Why? Because vertebrates find surprise itself reinforcing. B.F. Skinner was the first to observe this in rats. He discovered that rats would obsessively press a lever for food if the rewards were delivered on a variable ratio schedule, randomly, rather than consistently. This unpredictability made the behavior reinforcing, even when the total rewards were the same. Fish exhibit the same behavior, endlessly repeating actions in the hope of a surprise reward. Gambling exploits this ancient preference for surprise. Casinos design games to provide just enough uncertainty to keep players hooked, even as they lose money. Social media platforms like Instagram and Facebook use similar tactics, with endless scrolling and intermittent rewards, interesting posts, to keep users engaged. These systems hack into our 500 million-year-old curiosity-driven reinforcement system, creating behaviors that are hard to stop. But curiosity didn't evolve by accident. It was a necessity for survival. Early vertebrates, with their newfound ability to recognize patterns, remember places, and learn from past experiences, faced a unique opportunity. Learning itself became valuable. The more they explored, the more they learned about their environment, and the better they could adapt to challenges and opportunities. For example, a curious fish might discover a new hiding spot, a new food source, or a new way to avoid predators. Over time, this drive to explore and learn became hardwired into vertebrate brains, reinforced by the dopamine system. Surprise and novelty became intrinsically rewarding, ensuring that vertebrates would continue to seek out the unknown. The legacy of curiosity. Curiosity is one of the defining traits of vertebrates, shaping everything from how we learn as children to how we innovate as adults. It's the reason we explore new places, try new things, and push the boundaries of what we know. And it all started 500 million years ago in the tiny brain of a fish-like ancestor where learning became its own reward. So the next time you feel the urge to explore, try something new. Remember, you're tapping into an ancient drive, one that's been guiding vertebrates for 500 million years. Curiosity isn't just a quirk of human nature. It's the engine of evolution, the spark that keeps life moving forward. Chapter 9. The First Model of the World. Let's take a moment to appreciate something remarkable about your brain. It can build an internal model of the world. This ability allows you to navigate your home in the dark, find your way to the bathroom during a midnight stroll, or even imagine where objects are without seeing them. This skill, which we often take for granted, is a gift from our fish-like ancestors who lived 500 million years ago. It was in their tiny brains that the first spatial maps of the world were created, making a monumental leap in the evolution of intelligence. Imagine a fish in a tank with 25 identical containers, one of which contains food. At first, the fish explores randomly until it finds the food, but after a few trials, the fish learns to swim directly to the correct container, even if there's no food in it anymore. How does it do this? Fish isn't following a simple rule like turn left at this object or swim toward the smell of food. Instead, it's using the walls of the tank as landmarks to build a mental map of the space. This internal map allows the fish to remember the container's location relative to its surroundings. The ability to construct a spatial map is a hallmark of vertebrates. Fish, reptiles, mice, monkeys, and humans all share this skill. In contrast, simple bilaterians like nematodes and even many advanced invertebrates like ants cannot create such maps. For example, ants navigate by following a series of learned rules, such as turn left at QX. But if you disrupt their path, they'll start the loop over again, rather than taking a shortcut back to their nest. Fish, on the other hand, would simply turn around and head home, guided by their internal map. Your inner compass, the vestibular system. How do vertebrates keep track of their position in space? The answer lies in a unique sense called the vestibular sense, which originates in the semicircular canals of the inner ear. These tiny fluid-filled tubes detect movement in 3 dimensions, forward, sideways, and upwards. When you move your head, the fluid shifts, activating sensory neurons that signal the direction and speed of your movement. This system allows you to maintain your sense of direction even when your eyes are closed. For example, if you sit in a swivel chair, close your eyes, and spin around, you can still guess which direction you're facing. This is thanks to your vestibular system, which integrates movement data to update your brain's internal map of the world. Fish have the same semicircular canals, which help them distinguish between swimming toward an object and an object moving toward them. This ability to track movement is essential for building spatial maps. The medial cortex, the birthplace of spatial maps. In early vertebrates, the brain's cortex had 3 main regions: the lateral cortex for recognizing smells, the ventral cortex for processing light and sounds, and the medial cortex. The medial cortex, which later evolved into the hippocampus in mammals, is where spatial maps are constructed. In fish, neurons in the medial cortex activate in specific ways depending on the fish's location, direction, or proximity to a boundary. These neurons integrate visual, vestibular, and directional inputs to create a mental map of the environment. If you damage the hippocampus in a fish, it loses the ability to navigate using landmarks or remember specific locations. This shows that the medial cortex is essential for spatial memory and navigation. The hippocampus performs similar functions in mammals, including humans. For example, place cells in the hippocampus activate when you're in a specific location, helping you navigate through a maze or remember where you parked your car. This structure has been conserved across vertebrates, highlighting its importance in spatial cognition. The evolutionary significance of spatial maps. The ability to build spatial maps was a game changer for early vertebrates. It allowed them to do these 3 things: 1. Remember locations. Early vertebrates could recall where predators hid, where food was abundant, and where safe shelters were located. 2. Navigate flexibility. Unlike invertebrates, which relied on rigid rules, vertebrates could adapt their routes based on their internal map. And 3. Differentiate self from the world. To track their position in space, vertebrates had to distinguish between their own movements and the movements of external objects. This was also the first time a brain constructed an internal model of the world. Initially, this model was used for practical purposes like navigation, but it laid the foundation for more advanced cognitive abilities. The ability to represent the external world internally would eventually lead to imagination, planning, and abstract thought. Breakthrough number 2, reinforcement learning as spatial maps. The evolution of spatial maps was closely tied to the emergence of reinforcement learning in early vertebrates. Here's a quick recap of the key innovations that made this possible. There are 5 items in this recap. The first, dopamine as a learning signal. Dopamine became the temporal difference signal, helping animals learn through trial and error. 2. The basal ganglia. This brain structure acted as an actor-critic system, predicting future rewards and reinforcing behaviors. Curiosity. Vertebrates evolved to find novelty and surprise rewarding, driving exploration and learning. The cortex. This structure enabled pattern recognition and auto-associative memory, allowing vertebrates to recognize objects and generalize from past experiences. And 5. Timing and spatial perception. Vertebrates developed precise timing and the ability to model three-dimensional space, enabling them to learn not only what to do, but also when and where to do it. These innovations built on the simpler valence and associative learning systems of early bilaterians. Steering behaviors in bilaterians provided the foundation for trial and error learning in vertebrates, which in turn enabled the creation of spatial maps. The evolution of spatial maps marked a turning point in the history of life. For the first time, animals could represent the world in their minds, remember locations, and navigate flexibly. This ability gave vertebrates a significant advantage over their invertebrate counterparts, allowing them to explore new environments, avoid predators, and find resources more effectively. But the story doesn't end there. The internal model of space created by early vertebrates was just the beginning. The same ability to model the world would eventually lead to something even more extraordinary: the ability to imagine and plan. And as we'll see in the next chapter, the evolution of imagination was the next great leap in the history of the brain. Chapter 10, The Neural Dark Ages. Let's take a journey back in time, 200 million years ago to be exact, when the world was ruled by massive predators and life on Earth was undergoing dramatic transformations. This chapter tells the story of how our mammalian ancestors emerged from the shadows of extinction events, survived in a world dominated by reptiles, and developed groundbreaking neural innovation, the ability to simulate actions before doing them. This was the dawn of the neocortex, the foundation of human intelligence. The rise of predators and the first great death. Between 420 and 375 million years ago, the oceans were teeming with predatory fish, including 20-foot-long placoderms with bone-crushing teeth. Invertebrates like arthropods were forced to adapt or perish. Some evolved thicker shells, others became smaller, and a few, like cephalopods, the ancestors of squids and octopuses, developed impressive intelligence. But the most radical survival strategy was to leave the oceans entirely. Arthropods became the first animals to colonize land, finding refuge among the sparse, leafless plants that had begun to grow along the shorelines. As plants evolved, leaves and seeds, they spread rapidly across the land, transforming Earth's surface into a green paradise. But this unchecked growth came at a cost. The explosion of plant life caused carbon dioxide levels to plummet, triggering a global cooling event known as the Late Devonian Extinction. Oceans froze and nearly half of all life on Earth perished. Yet from this icy catastrophe, our ancestors emerged. The first tetrapods, life on land. Before the extinction, our fish-like ancestors had already begun venturing onto land. They developed lungs to breathe air, and they used their fins to wade between puddles in search of insects. When the oceans froze, these air-breathing, land-walking fish were among the first survivors. Over time, they lost their gills, and their fins evolved into fingered hands and feet, giving rise to the first tetrapods, four-limbed creatures resembling modern amphibians. Our lineage of tetrapods stayed near the water and became today's amphibians. Another lineage ventured further inland, evolving leathery eggs that could survive out of water. These were the amniotes, the ancestors of reptiles and mammals. Amniotes thrived on land, feasting on the abundant plants and insects. But life on land came with new challenges, like fluctuating temperatures. While reptiles coped by becoming immobile at night, another group of amniotes, our ancestors, the therapsids, took a different approach. They became warm-blooded. The therapsids, warm-blooded pioneers. Therapsids were the first vertebrates to generate their own internal heat, allowing them to hunt at night, when reptiles were cold and immobile. This gamble required more food to sustain their energy needs, but it paid off. During the Permian era, 300 to 250 million years ago, therapsids became the dominant land animals, growing to the size of modern tigers and developing hair to retain heat. They were the apex predators of their time, but as history often shows, all reigns come to an end. Around 250 million years ago, the Permian-Triassic extinction event, the deadliest event in Earth's history, wiped out 96% of marine life and 70% of land life. The large therapsids, with their high caloric needs, were among the first to die. Only small plant-eating therapsids like the burrowing cyanodonts survived. These tiny creatures, no more than a few inches long, would become the ancestors of mammals. In the aftermath of the extinction, reptiles took over. Dinosaurs and pterosaurs and other massive reptiles dominated the land, sea, and sky for the next 150 million years. To survive in this reptilian world, cyanodonts got smaller and more elusive. They became nocturnal, hiding in burrows during the day and emerging at night to hunt insects. These adaptations marked the birth of the first mammals. The neocortex, a new way of thinking. Early mammals, resembling modern mice or squirrels, were not stronger or faster than their reptilian predators, but they had one crucial advantage. They could make the first move. From the safety of their burrows, they could observe their surroundings, spot predators, and plan their actions. This ability to plan was made possible by a revolutionary neural innovation, the neocortex. The neocortex allowed early mammals to simulate actions before doing them. For example, a small mammal could look at a web of branches, spot a predatory bird, and mentally rehearse different escape routes. By imagining the outcomes of various actions, it could choose the safest path. This ability to learn by imagining rather than by trial and error was a game changer. Why simulating emerged in mammals? Two key factors made the evolution of simulation possible. 1. Far-ranging vision. On land, even at night, animals can see much further than underwater. This made it worthwhile to simulate and plan movements based on visual information. And 2. Warm-bloodedness. Simulating actions is computationally expensive and requires fast neural processing. Warm-blooded mammals with their higher body temperatures had faster firing neurons, enabling them to perform the complex computations needed for simulation. Interestingly, the only non-mammals that show evidence of simulation are birds, which independently evolved warm-bloodedness. The brain of early mammals. For hundreds of millions of years, brains remained relatively unchanged. From early vertebrates to reptiles and therapsids, the brain's basic structure was stuck in a neural dark age. But in early mammals, a spark of innovation emerged. The cortex, which had been a single structure in fish, split into 4 regions. 1. The olfactory cortex, specialized in recognizing smells. 2. The amygdala, focused on recognizing patterns associated with good or bad outcomes. And 3. The hippocampus, responsible for spatial maps and navigation. And lastly, 4. The neocortex, a completely new structure that enabled simulation and planning. Although the neocortex was small in early mammals, it was the seed from which human intelligence would grow. Today, the neocortex makes up 70% of the human brain and is the epicenter of our cognitive abilities. The evolution of the neocortex marks the end of the neural dark ages and the beginning of a new era in brain evolution. Early mammals, with their ability to simulate actions, were no longer limited to reacting to their environment. They could anticipate and plan for the future. This ability to learn by imagining, combined with their warm-bloodedness and nocturnal lifestyle, allowed mammals to survive and thrive in a world dominated by dinosaurs. The neocortex was a small innovation with enormous potential. Over the next chapters, we'll see how this structure expanded and evolved, eventually giving rise to the extraordinary intelligence of humans. But for now, let's appreciate the humble beginnings of this cognitive superpower, born in the tiny brain of a 4-inch-long mammal scurrying through the shadows of a dinosaur-dominated world. Chapter 11. Generative Models and the Neocortical Mystery. Let's talk about the neocortex, the part of the brain that makes up most of what you see when you look at a human brain. It's a thin folded sheet of neurons about 2 to 4 millimeters thick that would stretch to the size of a small desk if unfolded. Let's not unfold it. This unassuming structure is the powerhouse behind human intelligence, responsible for everything from vision and hearing to language, movement, and imagination. But how does one structure do so many different things? That's the mystery we're diving into in this chapter. The neocortex, a universal machine? At first glance, the neocortex seems like a jack of all trades. The back of the neocortex processes visual input, the auditory cortex handles sound, and other regions manage touch, taste, movement, even abstract functions like language and music. But how can one structure handle such a wide variety of tasks? In the mid-20th century, neuroscientist Vernon Mountcastle proposed a radical idea. The neocortex isn't specialized for different tasks. Instead, it's made up of repeating microcircuits called neocortical columns. Each column performs the same basic computation, regardless of whether it's processing visual, auditory, or motor information. The only difference between the regions of the neocortex is the input they receive and where they send their output. Mountcastle's theory was later tested in a groundbreaking experiment. Researchers rewired the brains of young ferrets so that input from the eyes was sent to the auditory cortex instead of the visual cortex. Remarkably, the ferrets could still see. The auditory cortex adapted to process visual information, supporting Mountcastle's idea that the neocortex is a general-purpose machine. This rewiring also restored the auditory capability of the ferrets, so it was kind of an amazing experiment. The neocortex is organized into 6 layers of neurons, each with specific roles. For example, layer 4 receives the input from the thalamus, while layer 5 sends the output to the motor areas in the basal ganglia. These layers are connected in a consistent pre-wired way, suggesting that the neocortex performs a specific computation. But what is that computation? To answer this, we need to look at the peculiar properties of perception. In the 19th century, scientists studying perception uncovered 3 strange properties that reveal how the brain processes sensory information. 1. Filling in. Your brain automatically fills in missing information. For example, when you see an incomplete word or shape, your brain perceives it as a whole. This happens across all senses, allowing you to understand garbled speech or recognize objects by touch. 2. One at a time. When presented with ambiguous stimuli, your brain can only perceive one interpretation at a time. For example, in an optical illusion that could be a duck or a rabbit, you can see either a duck or a rabbit, but not both simultaneously. Similarly, at a noisy party, you can focus on one conversation, but not 2 at once. 3. Can't unsee. Once your brain interprets ambiguous sensory input, it sticks to that interpretation. For example, if you're shown a blurry image and told it's a frog, you'll always see a frog, even if you didn't initially. These properties suggest that perception isn't a direct reflection of reality. Instead, your brain creates a simulated reality based on sensory input, a process called inference, first proposed by Hermann von Helmholtz. Generative models, recognizing by simulating. In the 1990s, Geoffrey Hinton and Peter Dayan built on Helmholtz's idea to create the Helmholtz machine, an early example of a generative model. Unlike traditional neural networks, which are trained with supervision, the Helmholtz machine learns by toggling between 2 modes. 1. Recognition mode. The network processes sensory input and tries to recreate it. 2. Generative mode. The network generates its own data and compares it to the input. By alternating between these 2 modes, the Helmholtz machine learned to recognize and generate images of handwritten numbers without being explicitly told what they were. This was a breakthrough in unsupervised learning, showing that a network could learn by simulating its own data. Modern generative models, like those used in deepfakes and AI art, are far more advanced. For example, the website thispersondoesnotexist.com uses a generative model to create realistic, never-before-seen faces. These models don't just recognize patterns, they understand the essence of what makes a face and can manipulate features like age, hair, color, and expression. The neocortex as a generative model. The neocortex appears to function like a generative model. It creates an internal simulation of the world and continuously compares this simulation to sensory input. This explains many phenomena. 1. Hallucinations. When sensory input is cut off, as in Charles Bonnet syndrome, the neocortex generates its own data, leading to vivid hallucinations. 2. Dreaming. During REM sleep, The neocortex may stabilize itself by generating simulations, which we experience as dreams. And 3, imagination. When you imagine something, your neocortex enters generative mode, creating a simulated reality. Interestingly, the same neurons that activate during perception also activate during imagination, showing that these processes are two sides of the same coin. Predicting the world. The neocortex's primary function is prediction. It uses internal simulation to predict sensory input, allowing you to detect surprises and adapt quickly. For example, as you walk, your neocortex predicts the sensation of your foot hitting the ground. If the ground isn't where you expect it to be, you immediately notice and adjust. This predictive ability evolved over time. Early bilaterians predicted simple reflexes. Early vertebrates predicted future rewards. Early mammals predicted all sensory data, creating a rich three-dimensional simulation of the world. The neocortex's predictive power is what makes it so versatile. It can process visual, auditory, and tactile input, rendering a unified simulation of the world. This is why the neocortex looks the same everywhere. Different regions simulate different aspects of the world based on the input they receive. The neocortex's ability to simulate the world gave early mammals a powerful advantage: imagination. By imagining future scenarios, they could plan actions, avoid danger, and exploit opportunities. This ability to learn by imagining rather than by trial and error was a game changer in the evolution of intelligence. Imagination is also what sets humans apart from even the most advanced AI systems. While AI can recognize patterns and generate data, it lacks the rich, flexible world models that allow humans to predict, plan, and innovate. As AI pioneer Jan LeCun puts it, what's missing from AI is the ability to learn powerful world models like those created by the neocortex. The third breakthrough, imagination. The evolution of the neocortex marked the third major breakthrough in the history of intelligence. Early mammals, with their tiny neocortices, gained the ability to simulate and imagine, laying the foundation for planning, memory, and reasoning. Over time, this small structure would expand and evolve, becoming the epicenter of human intelligence. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore how the neocortex enabled early mammals to develop attention, memory, and self-control, and how these abilities were repurposed for fine motor skills and abstract thought. The secrets of human-like intelligence lie in the neocortex, and understanding it may hold the key to creating truly intelligent AI systems. Chapter 12. Mice in the Imaginarium. The emergence of the neocortex was a game changer in the evolution of intelligence. While its modern applications include everything from writing poetry to planning careers, the original purpose of the neocortex was far simpler, yet profoundly impactful. It gave early mammals the ability to imagine the world as it is not. This ability to simulate possibilities rather than just react to the present was a survival tool that helped mammals navigate a world dominated by sharp-toothed dinosaurs for 150 million years. In this chapter, we explore 3 groundbreaking abilities that the neocortex brought to early mammals: vicarious trial and error, counterfactual learning, and episodic memory. These abilities allowed mammals to simulate, plan, and learn in ways that their cold-blooded ancestors could not. New ability 1, vicarious trial and error. In the 1930s, psychologist Edward Tolman observed something curious while studying rats in mazes. When rats reached a fork in the maze where the choice wasn't obvious, they paused and toggled their heads back and forth, as if weighing their options. Tolman speculated that the rats were mentally playing out each path before making a decision, a process he called vicarious trial and error. However, without direct evidence, the idea faded from favor. Fast forward to the 2000s, when neuroscientists David Reddish and Adam Johnson recorded the brain activity of rats navigating mazes. They discovered that when rats paused at decision points, the hippocampus, responsible for spatial mapping, rapidly played out sequences of possible future paths. In other words, the rats were literally imagining their options before choosing. This was groundbreaking. For the first time, scientists could see a brain simulating future actions. The ability to simulate future paths gave mammals a significant advantage over their cold-blooded ancestors. For example, in a detour task where food is placed behind a transparent barrier, fish repeatedly bump into the barrier, unable to figure out how to navigate around it. Even fish that have previously explored the tank fail to connect their past experience with the current problem. In contrast, rats quickly figure out how to navigate around the barrier, mentally simulating the solution before acting. Rats also use vicarious trial and error to adapt to changing circumstances. For instance, if a rat is placed in a maze with two types of food and suddenly becomes salt deprived, it will immediately head toward the salty food, even if it previously avoided it. This shows that rats can simulate the consequences of their actions based on their current needs, a level of flexibility that fish and reptiles lack. New ability number 2, counterfactual learning. Humans are notorious for ruminating about what could have been. While this tendency can lead to regret, it also has deep evolutionary roots. Counterfactual thinking, imagining alternative paths, allows us to learn from mistakes and make better choices in the future. This ability first emerged in early mammals. David Reddish and Adam Steiner demonstrated counterfactual learning in rats using a restaurant row maze. Rats ran in a circle, passing 4 corridors, each offering a different flavor of food, such as chocolate, cherry, banana. At each corridor, a tone signaled how long the rat would have to wait for the food. If a rat skipped a corridor, it couldn't go back until it completed the loop. When rats skipped a quick reward in favor of a gamble and ended up with a long wait, they showed signs of regret. They paused, looked back at the corridor they had passed, and even reactivated the neural representation of the missed food in their brain. This suggests that rats were imagining an alternative path where they made a better choice. Counterfactual learning also allows mammals to reason about causation. For example, if you see lightning strike a forest and a fire starts, you infer that the lightning caused the fire. The reasoning relies on imagining the counterfactual. If lightning hadn't struck, the fire wouldn't have started. Without the ability to simulate alternative paths, distinguishing causation from correlation would be impossible. Fish and reptiles, which lack counterfactual learning, are limited to reinforcing action they've actually taken. In contrast, mammals can learn from paths they didn't take, making their decision-making far more flexible and adaptive. New ability number 3, episodic memory. Episodic memory, the ability to recall specific past events, is another gift of the neocortex. This type of memory allows us to remember what we did 5 minutes ago, what we ate for dinner last night, or a funny joke from a wedding. But episodic memory isn't a perfect recording of the past. Instead, it's a simulation reconstructed by the brain. We know this because the same neural circuits that activate when we imagine the future are also active when we remember the past. Additionally, episodic memories are prone to filling in, much like visual perception. This is why eyewitness testimony is often unreliable. Our brains unconsciously alter and embellish memories during the act of remembering. The role of the hippocampus in episodic memory became clear in the famous case of Henry Molaison, HM, a patient who had his hippocampus removed to treat seizures. While the surgery reduced his seizures, it left him unable to form new memories. HM could recall events from before the surgery, but was stuck in 1953, unable to create new episodic memories. This revealed that the hippocampus is essential for encoding new memories, but not for retrieving old ones. In mammals, episodic memory relies on a partnership between the hippocampus and the neocortex. The hippocampus quickly encodes new experiences, while the neocortex stores and retrieves detailed simulations of past events. This dynamic also helps solve the problem of catastrophic forgetting, where new memories overwrite old ones. By replaying recent experiences, the hippocampus helps the neocortex integrate the new memories without losing the old ones. Model-free versus model-based learning. The abilities described above, vicarious trial and error, counterfactual learning, and episodic memory, are hallmarks of model-based reinforcement learning. Unlike model-free learning, which relies on direct associations between actions and rewards, model-based learning involves building an internal model of the world and using it to simulate different actions before making a decision. This makes model-based learning slower but far more flexible. Most modern AI systems, like those used in self-driving cars or game-playing algorithms, rely on model-free learning. These systems act immediately based on sensory input without pausing to simulate future actions. Model-based learning, while powerful, is harder to implement because it requires 2 things. 1. A world model. The system must construct an internal representation of how its actions affect the world. and 2, efficient search. The system must decide which actions to simulate, as exploring every possibility is computationally impossible. Early mammals solved these challenges with their neocortex, which rendered a rich, flexible simulation of the world. This allowed them to predict the consequences of their action, adapt to changing circumstances, and learn from both past mistakes and imagined futures. The power of simulation. The neocortex ability to simulate gave early mammals a survival edge in a world dominated by dinosaurs. By imagining future scenarios, they could plan their actions, avoid danger, and exploit opportunities. This ability to learn by imagining rather than by trial and error was a revolutionary step in the evolution of intelligence. Today, these same abilities, vicarious trial and error, counterfactual learning, and episodic memory, form the foundation of human cognition. They allow us to plan, reason, and reflect on our lives. And while modern AI systems have made incredible strides, they still lack the rich, flexible world models that the neocortex provides. Understanding how the neocortex works may hold the key to creating truly intelligent machines. In the next chapter, we'll explore how the neocortex enables even more advanced cognitive abilities like attention, working memory, and self-control. But for now, let's appreciate the humble beginnings of these abilities in the tiny brains of early mammals scurrying through the shadows of a dinosaur-dominated world. Chapter 13, Model-Based Reinforcement Learning. Let's dive into the fascinating world of model-based reinforcement learning, a concept that has revolutionized both artificial intelligence and our understanding of mammalian brains. This chapter explores how the ability to simulate future possibilities rather than just reacting to the present gave mammals a critical edge in survival, and how this same principle underpins some of the most advanced AI systems today. The limits of model-free learning. Model-free reinforcement learning, like Sutton's temporal difference learning, works well in simple environments. For example, TD Gammon, an AI system based on temporal difference learning, mastered backgammon by learning through trial and error. However, when researchers tried to apply the same approach to more complex games like chess, the results were disappointing. Why? Because model-free systems lack the ability to plan ahead. They can't identify moves that might not look great now, but set you up for success later. This limitation became even more apparent with the game of Go, an ancient Chinese board game far more complex than chess. The sheer number of possible board positions in Go is astronomical, making it impossible for a model-free system to succeed. Enter AlphaZero, a groundbreaking AI system developed by Google's DeepMind in 2017, which achieved superhuman performance in both chess and Go. How did it succeed where model-free systems failed? By simulating future possibilities. AlphaZero, a model-based revolution. AlphaZero was a model-based reinforcement learning system. Unlike TD Gammon, which relied solely on trial and error, AlphaZero simulated thousands of possible future moves before deciding what to do next. For example, after its opponent made a move, AlphaZero would play out potential games in its mind, evaluating which move led to the highest win rates. If move A led to a win in 35 out of 40 imagined games, and move B led to a win in 39 out of 40, AlphaZero would choose move B, 39 out of 40, instead of 35 out of 40. Of course, simulating every possible future move in a game like Go would take millions of years, even with Google's supercomputers. So how did AlphaZero manage to run these simulations in just half a second? By prioritizing. It didn't simulate every possibility. It focused on the most promising moves as predicted by its actor-critic system. This approach allowed AlphaZero to combine the strengths of model-free learning, quick predictions, with the power of model-based planning, evaluating future outcomes. The challenges of real-world planning. While AlphaZero was a huge leap forward, its planning abilities were limited to discrete deterministic environments like board games. The real world is far messier. Actions are continuous. There are finite possible movements. Information is incomplete and noisy, and rewards are complex and ever-changing. For example, a mammal navigating its environment must balance competing needs like finding food, avoiding predators, and seeking shelters. What sets mammalian brains apart from AI systems like AlphaZero isn't just their ability to handle these complexities, it's their flexibility. Mammals can adapt their planning strategies to different situations. Sometimes they pause to simulate future possibilities, and other times they act instinctively. Sometimes they imagine detailed plans, and other times they focus on the big picture. This flexibility is the key to their success. The role of the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex, PFC, is the part of the brain responsible for controlling simulations. While the sensory neocortex renders simulations of the external world, the PFC decides when and what to simulate. Damage to the PFC can have profound effects, as seen in the case of a patient named L, who suffered a stroke in her prefrontal cortex. Although she could move and understand her surroundings, she had no will to act or speak. Her mind felt empty, as if she had lost all intention. The PFC is divided into three main regions: the motor cortex, the granular prefrontal cortex, GPFC, and the agranular prefrontal cortex, APFC. The APFC, the most ancient part of the PFC, evolved in the first mammals and plays a crucial role in triggering and controlling simulations. Without a functioning APFC, mammals lose the ability to engage in vicarious trial and error, recall episodic memories, or learn from counterfactuals. They become impulsive, make poor decisions, and struggle to adapt to new situations. How mammals make choices. When a mammal faces a decision, such as choosing between two paths in a maze, this process unfolds in three steps. 1. Triggering simulation. The APFC monitors the situation for uncertainty. If predictions about the best course of action are inconsistent or unclear, the APFC triggers a pause and initiates a simulation. 2. Simulating options. The APFC plays out the most promising options, using the sensory neocortex to render detailed simulations of each path. For example, it might simulate going left to find water or going right to find food. 3. Choosing an option. The basal ganglia, which accumulates votes for competing actions, makes the final decision based on the results of the simulations. If the imagined path to water produces more dopamine, a signal of reward, than the path to food, the basal ganglia will choose water. This process allows mammals to make smarter, more flexible decisions than their cold-blooded ancestors who relied solely on trial and error. Goals versus habits. One of the most fascinating aspects of mammalian brains is their ability to balance goal-driven behavior with habitual behavior. Goals are created by the APFC, which simulates future outcomes and selects actions to achieve a desired end state. Habits, on the other hand, are automated actions controlled by the basal ganglia. They are efficient but inflexible as they bypass the simulation process. Psychologist Tony Dickinson demonstrated this duality in experiments with rats. When rats were trained to press a lever for food, they stopped pressing the lever if the food was later devalued, that is, paired with illness. They showed that the rats were simulating the consequences of their actions. However, if the rats had pressed the lever hundreds of times, they developed a habit and continued pressing it even after the food was devalued. This illustrates how repeated behaviors can become automatic, bypassing the APFC's goal-driven simulations. The evolution of goals. The ability to set and pursue goals is a uniquely mammalian trait. While the basal ganglia can learn to maximize rewards through trial and error, it doesn't have intent or goals in the way the APFC does. The APFC constructs goals by observing behavior and simulating future outcomes. Over time, it takes control of decision-making, guiding the basal ganglia toward more complex goal-oriented behaviors. This dynamic between the APFC and the basal ganglia is what allows mammals to pause, reflect, and make deliberate choices. It's also what enables humans to ask the question, "Why did you do that?" A question that model-free systems, whether in mammals or AI, cannot answer. The power of simulation. The APFC doesn't just control planning, it also governs attention, working memory, and self-control. These functions are all variations of the same process, selecting and maintaining simulations. For example, attention focuses on specific aspects of the external world, constraining simulations to match sensory input. Working memory holds simulations in mind, allowing mammals to remember past actions or plan future ones. Self-control inhibits impulsive actions, enabling mammals to stick to their plans even when faced with distractions or temptations. This ability to control simulations is what sets mammals apart from other vertebrates. It allows them to learn faster, adapt to new environments, and pursue long-term goals. The inner duality of mammals. Mammals are constantly balancing two modes of decision-making: model-based, goal-driven, and model-free, habitual. Each has its strengths and weaknesses. Model-based decisions are flexible and deliberate, but slow and energy-intensive. Model-free decisions are fast and efficient, but inflexible. The brilliance of mammalian brains lies in their ability to intelligently switch between these modes depending on the situation. This duality is reflected in many fields, from AI, model-based versus model-free learning, to psychology, goal-driven versus habitual behavior, to behavioral economics, thinking fast versus thinking slow. It's a testament to the evolutionary ingenuity of the mammalian brain, which has given us the ability to imagine, plan, and achieve our goals. Chapter 14, The Secret to Dishwashing Robots. Let's start with a thought experiment. Imagine your hand suddenly loses its fine motor control. You can no longer move your fingers independently, and your hand becomes a clumsy claw. Soon you can't even hold a book. This is what happens when a stroke damages the motor cortex, part of the brain responsible for controlling movement. For humans and other primates, the motor cortex is essential for fine motor skills, and damage to it can cause paralysis. But in many other mammals, like rats and cats, damage to the motor cortex doesn't cause paralysis. They can still walk, hunt, and move around. So what's going on here? Why is the motor cortex so critical for primates but not for other mammals? And what does this tell us about how brains, maybe even robots, control movement? The motor cortex. Predictions, not commands. The motor cortex is a thin strip of neocortex that controls movement. It's organized as a map of the body, with more space dedicated to areas requiring fine motor control, like the hands and the mouth. For a long time, scientists believed that the motor cortex was the brain's command center for movement, directly telling muscles what to do. But this idea doesn't hold up for two reasons. First, the motor cortex has the same microcircuitry as other parts of the neocortex, which are designed for prediction and simulation, not direct control. Second, many mammals without a motor cortex, or with damage to it, can still move around normally. For example, rats and cats with motor cortex damage can walk, eat, and hunt just fine. This suggests that the motor cortex isn't the original source of motor commands. Instead, it's involved in something else. Carl Friston, a pioneer in the theory of active inference, offers an alternative explanation. The motor cortex doesn't generate commands, it generates predictions. It observes movements processed in the somatosensory cortex, which handles touch and body position, and predicts what the body will do next. Over time, these predictions became wired to influence the spinal cord, effectively making the motor cortex's predictions come true. In this way, the motor cortex operates like other parts of the neocortex, using simulation to guide behavior. The original function of the motor cortex. If the motor cortex isn't necessary for basic movement, what was its original purpose? In non-primate mammals, the motor cortex is critical for two things: performing skilled movements and learning new movement sequences. For example, a rat with motor cortex damage struggles to place its paw on a small platform or reach through a hole to grab food. It can still perform well-learned movements, but it can't learn new ones. This suggests that the motor cortex evolved to plan and simulate precise movements, especially those requiring fine motor control. Recording studies support this idea. In non-primate mammals, the motor cortex is most active during movements that require planning, like stepping over an obstacle or placing a paw on a narrow branch. This activity begins before the movement starts, indicating that the motor cortex is simulating the action in advance. In humans, the motor cortex is also activated during imagined movements. For example, thinking about walking activates the leg area of the motor cortex. Even hearing sentences about movement, like, "I get up and walk to the door," can subtly affect posture, showing how deeply intertwined imagined and actual movements are. The motor cortex gave early mammals a significant advantage in fine motor skills. Mice can pick up seeds and break them open. Squirrels and cats can climb trees, carefully placing their limbs to avoid falling. They can also plan and execute precise jumps. In contrast, reptiles are clumsy movers. Studies show that lizards don't anticipate obstacles or adjust their movements to navigate platforms. This lack of planning explains why most reptiles avoid trees, while mammals thrive in them. A hierarchy of goals from high level to low level. The motor cortex is part of a larger motor hierarchy in the frontal neocortex. At the top of this hierarchy is the agranular prefrontal cortex, APFC, which generates high-level goals like find water or eat food. These goals are passed down to the premotor cortex, which breaks them into sub-goals, and then to the motor cortex, which handles the fine details of movement, like place your index finger here. The hierarchical system allows the brain to distribute effort efficiently. The APFC doesn't worry about the specifics of movement, it focuses on the big picture. Similarly, the motor cortex doesn't worry about high-level goals, it focuses on precise movements. The basal ganglia, a structure connected to the frontal cortex, plays a key role in this system. The front part of the basal ganglia handles high-level goals, while the back part handles low-level motor habits. Together, these systems balance flexibility and efficiency. Simulation versus automation. The motor hierarchy reflects a balance between simulation and automation. The neocortex, including the motor cortex, excels at simulation. It's slow but flexible, allowing mammals to plan and learn new behaviors. The basal ganglia, on the other hand, excels at automation. It's fast but inflexible, handling well-learned habits. For example, when you're learning to play a new song on the guitar, your motor cortex is heavily involved in planning each movement. But once you've mastered the song, the basal ganglia takes over, allowing you to play it automatically. This balance is evident in the experiments with rats. When the motor cortex is damaged, rats struggle to learn new motor skills, but can still perform the old ones. When the basal ganglia is damaged, rats lose their motor habits, but remain capable of planning new movements. This division of labor allows mammals to adapt to new challenges while maintaining efficiency. The secret to dishwashing robots. The motor cortex and its surrounding systems hold the key to building robots with human-like motor skills. Imagine a robot that can load a dishwasher. To succeed, it would need to 1. Learn new tasks through trial and error. 2. Adjust its movements in real time to account for changes in the environment. 3. Break high-level goals into sub-goals and execute them with precision. And 4. Balance simulation, planning, and automation, habitual actions. These are exactly the skills of the motor cortex in mammals. If roboticists can replicate this system, they could create robots capable of learning complex tasks, adapting to new environments, and performing fine motor skills with the same energy efficiency as a human brain. The evolutionary gift of simulation. The motor cortex is part of a broader evolutionary breakthrough, the ability to simulate. Early mammals used their neocortex to create internal models of the world, their own movements, and their goals. This allowed them to do the following 4 things: engage in vicarious trial and error, simulating future actions to choose the best path. 2. Learn from counterfactuals, assigning credit to actions based on imagined outcomes. 3. Recall episodic memories, using past experiences to guide future behavior. And 4. Plan and execute precise movements, enabling fine motor skills. This ability to simulate gave mammals a critical edge in a world dominated by dinosaurs. It allowed them to outthink their predators, navigate complex environments, and perform skilled movements. Today, it's the same ability that makes humans capable of everything from playing the piano to designing robots. As we continue to study the motor cortex and its role in simulation, we're not just uncovering the secrets of our own brains, we're also laying the groundwork for the next generation of intelligent machines. Whether roboticists replicate mammalian brains or find entirely new solutions, one thing is clear. The motor cortex is a masterclass in how to balance flexibility, precision, and efficiency. And that's a lesson worth learning. Chapter 15. The Arms Race for Political Savvy. Let's rewind to a day 66 million years ago, a day that began like any other but ended with the world forever changed. Dinosaurs ruled the Earth, mammals were small and nocturnal, and the ecosystem was in balance. Then an asteroid struck, sending debris into the atmosphere and plunging the planet into darkness for years. This catastrophic event wiped out most dinosaurs, leaving only birds as their descendants. But for mammals, it was an opportunity. With their predators gone, they diversified, adapted, and thrived in the new world. Among these mammals were our ancestors who eventually evolved into the first primates. And with them came a new evolutionary breakthrough, the ability to navigate complex social worlds. The rise of the first primates. Our early primate ancestors found refuge in the trees of Africa. They shifted from being nocturnal to diurnal, developed opposable thumbs to grasp branches, and transitioned from an insect-based diet to a fruit-based one. Living in groups, they faced little predation and food competition, which allowed their brains to grow dramatically. But why did primates evolve such large brains, especially the neocortex? The answer lies in their unique social lives. The social brain hypothesis. In the 80s and 90s, researchers like Robin Dunbar proposed that primates' large brains weren't driven by ecological challenges but by social ones. Primates lived in stable, complex groups, and maintaining these groups required advanced cognitive abilities. Dunbar tested this theory by examining the relationship between neocortex size and social group size in primates. The results were striking. The bigger the neocortex, the larger the social group. But this correlation didn't hold for other animals. For example, buffalo live in large herds, but their brains aren't significantly bigger than those of solitary moose. What made primary groups different? The answer lies in the unique challenges of group living. The evolutionary tension between the collective and the individual. Group living offers clear benefits, like protection from predators. For example, if one antelope in a herd spots a lion and runs, the rest will follow, reducing the risk of being caught. But group living also comes with costs, such as competition for food and mates. To minimize these costs, animals evolve ways to resolve conflicts without physical fights. For instance, deer lock antlers to establish dominance, and dogs roll over to signal submission. Mammals developed various social structures to balance these trade-offs. 1. Solitary. Animals, like tigers, live alone, meeting only to mate. 2. Pair-bonded. Species like red foxes form monogamous pairs to raise offspring. 3. Harems. Groups with one dominant male and multiple females, like camels. And 4. Multi-male groups. Groups with many males and females, like chimpanzees. Early primates likely lived in multi-male groups with strict hierarchies. Dominance determined access to food and mates, and lower-ranking individuals had to submit to higher-ranking ones. But primates took sociality to a new level, developing behaviors that were far more complex than those of other mammals. Machiavellian apes. In the 1970s, primatologist Emil Menzel observed chimpanzees in a forest and discovered something remarkable. When a subordinate chimp named Belle learned the location of hidden food, she initially shared it with the group. But after the dominant male, Rock, repeatedly took all the food for himself, Belle began devising strategies to hide the food from him. She sat on the food, waited for Rock to look away, and even tried to lead him in the wrong direction. In response, Rock developed counter-strategies like pretending to be disinterested and then ambushing her. This back-and-forth deception and counter-deception revealed that both Belle and Rock could understand each other's intentions and manipulate each other's beliefs. This ability to infer the thoughts and intentions of others is called theory of mind. It's a cognitive skill that allows individuals to predict others' behavior based on their knowledge, desires, and goals. Other experiments have confirmed that apes possess theory of mind. For example, apes can distinguish between intentional and accidental actions. When shown boxes marked intentionally or accidentally, they chose the intentionally marked box for food. Apes can infer whether someone is unwilling or unable to give them food. They prefer to interact with those who seem unable, as they're more likely to help in the future. And apes understand knowledge differences. For example, they know to approach a human wearing transparent goggles who can see them, rather than opaque goggles who cannot. While some other animals, like birds and dolphins, may have basic forms of theory of mind, this ability seems to have first emerged in early primates. It was a game changer, enabling them to navigate their complex social worlds. Primate politics. One of the most visible social behaviors in primates is grooming. While it has some hygienic benefits, grooming is primarily a social activity. It strengthens bonds, builds alliances, and reinforces hierarchies. Primates spend significant time grooming specific individuals, often forming lifelong partnerships. Primate societies are not random collections of individuals. They are structured, hierarchical, and dynamic. For example, dominance hierarchies. In vervet monkeys, dominance is signaled through approach-retreat behaviors. These hierarchies are transitive. If A submits to B submits to C, then A will submit to C, and they're stable over time. Family-based hierarchies. In many primate groups, rank is inherited. A juvenile from a high-ranking family can dominate a stronger adult from a low-ranking family. And alliances and friendships. High-ranking individuals form alliances to maintain their status, while low-ranking individuals forge friendships to improve their quality of life. For example, a low-ranking monkey with a powerful ally is less likely to be harassed. Primate politics is sophisticated. Monkeys and apes invest in relationships with higher-ranking individuals, compete for access to powerful allies, and even reconcile after conflicts. For example, after a fight, a monkey might groom its opponent or their family members to repair the relationship. The arms race for political savvy. Why did primates evolve such complex social behaviors? The answer may lie in their unique ecological niche. Early primates were frugivores, foraging for fruit in treetops. This diet provided them with abundant calories and, more importantly, free time. Unlike most animals which spend their days searching for food, primates had time to socialize. This created an evolutionary arms race for political savvy. Smarter primates could form better alliances, outmaneuver rivals, and secure more resources, leading to bigger brains and more advanced social skills. This arms race also explains the emergence of theory of mind. To navigate their social hierarchies, primates needed to understand others' intentions, predict their behavior, and manipulate their beliefs. This ability laid the foundation for many human social instincts, from trust and reciprocity to deception and tribalism. The legacy of primate sociality. The social lives of early primates were the crucible in which many of our human traits were forged. Their ability to form alliances, navigate hierarchies, and understand others' minds set the stage for the complex societies we see today. And while their political savvy may have been born out of competition, it also gave rise to some of the most profound aspects of human nature: cooperation, empathy, and the ability to imagine the thoughts of others. In the next chapter, we'll explore how primates' growing brains and social intelligence paved the way for even more remarkable cognitive feats. But for now, let's appreciate the ingenuity of our primate ancestors who turned free time into an evolutionary advantage and forever changed the trajectory of life on Earth. This is the end of Part 2 of A Brief History of Intelligence by Max Bennett. I find this book very insightful, where he compares the evolution of the brain with the evolution of artificial intelligence. And there's more to come in Part 3. It's a great book. If you're interested in learning more, pick up a copy. But that's where we have to leave it this week. Thanks for joining. That's a wrap.